everyone. Thank you for having me along today. James, thank you very much for that talk. It was fantastic. I really think a lot of things I hope to talk about in this are really going to build and reinforce a lot of what you were saying. So thank you for that. So in terms of this talk is going to be given from a perspective of a real live company that I'm working with at the moment. So it's a story that has taken place over time and is still ongoing. But the first thing we really need to do in establishing this story is we need to meet our villain. And you'll excuse me if I dwell slightly on our villain. Someone gave me a broadcast system and an audience to talk to, and it feels like a duty at the moment to really make sure we have a good view of what is going on. So our villain is really this story, is our challenge to make progress towards a carbon net zero energy supply and a way of living as a community where we can avoid this current trend, which is towards warming of over 1.5. So we can see on this graph, if you see right in the middle there's a little window of opportunity where we're likely to cross over that 1.5 degree mark, and that could happen as soon as 6 years time, but it's a bit of a window depending on the local variation. But that is our challenge, that in that sort of years, not tens of years necessarily, years, that we need to meet this challenge. And what I also wanted to talk about is these are some of the things that keep me awake at night. So these are the reasons that we don't need to really do anything yet. This is what I hear people talk about, people say in bus queues. So one is that we've always had heat waves. I remember when I was a kid, it was super hot. It was this hot. So we don't really do anything now. It's always been like this. And so what this really shows is those heat waves that have got to similar temperatures. But as you can see, as we get into the ones that happened this year and most recently, that globally the picture is very, very different from what it was in 1911 and 76, these sorts of years, where actually these anomalies weren't global, they were localized, but now we are seeing that global impact. And this is another similar view of that, just a very simple infographic, which is that progression over time and how you can see that there is a really dramatic change in the global average temperature. And what I really like about this graphic is that the people at Res, for example, have this in their email footer. So it's a constant ever reminder to themselves and to the people that they are talking to that this is the nature of the challenge that they are trying to address on that daily sort of cadence. Another thing that I hear is that it's inevitable that we are going to use all of this carbon. We're going to use it up, and then when all of that is used up, that is going to be a really great time for us to switch. But what this shows is that pre-2000 is that green bar, that's the carbon that has been used. And then those two, the green and the black bar in the middle, are sort of our safe budget as we can consume before we hit that 1.5 degree line. And then those orange blocks on the right are everything that is left over. And you can see that just by comparing those two sides, there is a huge potential of carbon that can still be dug up out of the ground and burnt. So really any sense that we'll just use it all up, there's loads of, it's a finite supply and then we'll switch, that is not true. This comes from a really great book, this data visualization book, which I thoroughly recommend. There is links at the end of the talk, so you can go off and find these things. So don't worry so much. And then, of course, in the recent times, we've seen a real threat around the weaponization of energy and energy supply. Obviously, the war in Ukraine and those interactions on that sort of geopolitical global stage, and that's having a very direct impact on us individually, how we are living our daily lives, the cost of energy, the decisions that people are having to make, and we can see that really rapid impact. So thinking about where are all of these emissions coming from, there's this really useful graphic which shows, that a vast majority are coming from our need for energy, which is great because it's a large addressable market. So if we can come up with new solutions for meeting that energy, we've got a huge part of that pie that we can look to address very quickly and easily, not easily, but So just to summarize, we've got this huge challenge. The challenge is a challenge that we need to meet in years, not necessarily even tens of years, that we need to scale this solution for how are we going to source energy as a global community, and also that there is very little room for failure. There isn't really an opportunity to have a go at one approach for 10 or 20 years, and if that doesn't work, we'll pivot to something else. We need to be thinking, iterating towards the best possible solution. Now, so who am I? I am Ben Dodd. I was introduced, the founder of Armakuni. When I was young, I used to tell really bad jokes, but luckily I had 3 children, and now I tell bad jokes, and dad jokes are the sort of the acceptable phase of really bad jokes. And what I do, I spend my time working with clients and customers. Res, who I've been working with, give me an interesting opportunity to learn a whole new genre of jokes. So this is my warning to you that a terrible dad joke is about to happen. You may want to either screenshot it because you're a dad joke fan, or you may want to groan. And so I did this talk a couple of weeks ago in front of 200 people, and I was getting some really, really good groans. So the first joke is, what do wind turbines think of renewable energy? And of course, they're a big fan. I'm seeing if I can hear groans from South London. Anyway, so we've met our villain. Let's now meet our superhero. And our superhero, for this example, is a company called Res. I've been working with them for 2 or so years. And Res are already a really good, great company. But what they need to pivot to is great and elite, because the scale of the challenge that they are facing is so great. So this is what Res looks like. They've got a global footprint in terms of the assets that they build and run. Lots in Europe and the UK, but also America and Australia. And they cover the sort of the whole range of renewable technology, which is wind, solar, storage, some transmission, and the new venture around green hydrogen. But what's also an interesting thing for the stories we go on is that they are the sort of end-to-end delivery company. So they will assess sites using LiDAR and radar and technology to work out how much energy they will get from a hill or a patch of sea. They will then construct the actual hardware, and then they will then support those services. So optimizing them for the most possible energy. So how they think about technology and its implementation spans that entire phase. It's not all bound up in digital only services. So really, the sort of, as we talk about you build it, you run it, they really do build it and they really do run it. And Res were facing a growing number of challenges. So they were facing ever more assets that they had to manage, and also that they had to manage those assets in a more efficient way. They couldn't continue to scale the number of people that they had in line with the number of turbines or solar farms that they were being asked to manage. And also that there is, they are market leading in terms of renewables, but we're starting to see things like the traditional oil and gas companies wanting to move into this space, and are a challenge to that. And I don't think those companies necessarily always have the best intention. So it's very important for companies with a great track record and a great mission like Res to be able to transform and address the new challenges as they go forward. I'm going to pause for a drink. 1 second. So in terms of what we're going to talk about today, what is on the menu? So I think we think of in terms of, aligning for fast flow, and that the alignment that has to happen addresses a whole separate domains or separate areas that aren't necessarily just what is our continuous delivery pipeline, which is defined in GitHub and is deploying to a Kubernetes. So the first thing, and all of these have to be sort of addressed at the same time and have to be aligned to get really fast flow. So there's a fast flow of work and alignment that we know the people on the ground know what they're trying to do, that they're all pointed in the right direction, that they can communicate and collaborate in the best possible way. That Res is full of fantastic people with all sorts of amazing expertise in the field of building, running, optimizing renewable assets. So it's important that we can transfer their expertise into digital products so that we can get that insight to customers in the best possible way. And obviously we then got the technical optimization of getting software created out to devices that are in the field so that we can configure and optimize the information that they are sending back. And then when it does return, that data is then reasoned about in the best possible way in terms of the analytical and support software that utilizes it. And we also need to think about the flow of data into wisdom. So even we've got lots of things in the field which are generating information and raw data, but that needs to be interpreted. It needs to be converted into value, which can then customers can make the best possible use of. And then that last final point is how can we move from, IT as a cost center and those sorts of things to teams that can generate value that flows directly to their customers, and that we have those people being able to talk and get feedback from those customers. So thinking first about that pipeline of work and alignment. So this is really how Res used to be organized. So it was really a single monolithic product being developed by a single team. And that single piece of software was responsible for lots of technologies, responsible for wind and solar, storage, etc., etc., and that they managed all the aspects of supporting those sorts of products. So reporting, analysis, data visualization, all those sorts of things. Res found that it had served them really well. It had served them really well for 10 years, but they'd got to the point where they could no longer scale. And of course, there are advantages to working this way, but I think it's probably worth just covering what was the barriers to that scale that they were starting to experience. So they were facing a real mismatch of requests across a large stack of responsibilities. They were having to switch context really regularly. They found prioritization very difficult. And the cognitive load on the team was extremely high. And so that overall effect was that the speed of development had started to stagnate, even though it had been great for 10 years previously. So this is this is where Res are now. So this is the after. So in their sort of complex industry, they've ended up with this pyramid structure for where each team is building value on top of the previous team. So you've got data acquisition, who are really responsible for getting the data from the edge, bringing it back into the cloud, rationalizing that data before it's then interpreted. And then there are a series of analytical products which then run against that data. And from that, you get insights. So on all those stacks, value is generated, added, until they get to this single pane of glass view, which is a platform as a product which sits on top. So they're getting the basics right. They've got this clear pyramid where they can clearly see at each stage how they can think, reason about the data, start to think how it transforms into wisdom, and then how that translates very easily into more energy. And more energy in this means more money, and it means that they're making greater progress towards that net zero goal that they have. So in terms of what the teams look like now, teams are a lot smaller. They're allowing for that specialism, and they're also experts in what they do, whereas before they had to think about all the possible dimensions and be context switching between the two. Each of the teams get to choose which technology they work for, and technology that fits their specific use case, and that the boundaries and responsibilities are really clear, that everyone sort of knows the service that they offer to each other, and the value that they then add to their customers. And then also that they've moved to that X as a service or platform as a service mindset. Sorry, 1 second. Yes, and they can start to have that mindset when they are providing value and products to their customers, but then also as they are interacting together, they can have that same product mindset. And of course, all these interfaces are bound by APIs, and you find that the cognitive load of these teams can be reduced because there's a clear set of interactions between the teams, and as a result, they can deliver better services to their products. So the learnings that Res had through this process is it's really, really challenging. There are a lot of options for how they could have moved from that monolithic application into the teams that they currently have now. And this is the teams that they have of today. But even today, they are thinking about, is this the right shape, and should we be doing something else? So there's a lot of those options, and picking the right one and navigating that is very difficult. But they are finding that with those smaller products and those smaller product teams, that they have greater agility, so they can actually build and deliver faster. But also that building quality into that software is really key. And that has been a real growth area, I think, in this case, about how they are building software, how they are shipping it, how they are owning it. What does it mean as they break down into these smaller teams? What does that mean for them on their day-to-day in that you build it, you run it sense? And I think the last one, a really big key thing for them was, even though they'd thought that moving into this teams was really a technical endeavor, it was not a surprise, but it was the cultural change that they hadn't necessarily expected. The scale off was bigger than they thought, and thinking about the impact on changing the teams and changing their tool sets. But actually, I think, as James said previously, that it's about the people and it's about the culture. So this is a similar view of that diagram. We're big fans of team topologies and the team topologies book. So this diagram gives you a similar view, and it's the team topology visualization has really been really powerful because it's given us that technical and visual terminology and language that we can start to talk about teams and how they interact in the same way. And for me, that's a huge challenge that we have in our industry, just getting people to use the same visual approach and the same terminology so that we can have the most clear conversations. So you can see here that we've got the teams defined as stream aligned, flow aligned teams. They all know who their customers are. They can talk to their customers regularly, but they also are providing a service to other teams in the environment, all the way up to Uno, which was that platform at the top. But then also the Uno platform is starting to provide services back to those teams. So that's things like authentication and those sorts of services. But being able to use the team topologies and that sort of conversational shortcuts has been really, really positive and a really important thing of this story. But I would say that that the team topologies, the visual element of that, where you are being able to use that visual cues to talk about teams, to iterate on how those teams work together, is based on a foundation of all these other things, and that those two things have got to be thought about at the same time. And there's technical excellence is one of those things and is really key, but there are all those other things, and it has been a challenge to think about all of those at the same time, but incredibly powerful if you do. So team topologies has been really powerful in lots of ways, but the end state of team topologies isn't to come up with the best org chart for right now. It's really to build a sensing capability so that as the organization changes and goes, and there are different challenges in the broader environment, that they have a way to think about how are our teams organized, what are the awkward interactions that exist or we're starting to sense between our teams, and how can we quickly start to optimize those interactions for even faster flow, as opposed to, I think, what we've seen in lots of other organizations and other verticals, and I've certainly seen, is that, org designs which are designed to last for 5 years, and to change those, you need to have another big bang 1 or 2 year change process. Whereas this, in the same way that we are thinking about iterating on how we deliver software, how our teams work, how we're working at that team level, this gives us that opportunity to iterate, sense, change, and improve the way that teams of teams are working together. And this is why this has proven to be so powerful, and why I and we are such big fans of it. So I'm running slightly short on time, but I wanted to give you a bit of an insight about how, once we do have a sense of what those first candidate teams are that can be allowed, can be aligned in that team topologies way, how we can get those teams up and running, aligned as quickly as possible. And so this is another one of those pipelines. It's a process that we go through. This is a Miro board, but designed to negotiate with the team how they're going to work together, and what is their place in the broader organization. So a couple of elements of that. One is this one, where you're looking to build a North Star, and the North Star not just for the team, but also for the broader organization, so that the team can see, well, this is what I need to achieve. This is what is really driving us and what our challenge is. And this is where it fits in very clearly with what the whole business is trying to achieve. And this is, just as a facilitation, this is a great opportunity to get leaders from the organization to come and talk to their North Star, and for the product leadership in the teams to talk about what they are trying to achieve, and how those things complement each other is really key. And if they don't, obviously that's a cue for a conversation. It's also really important to keep the main thing as the main thing. So we're big fans of goals and non-goals, and goals are things that we want to achieve right now. These are the most important things we're going to do as a team now, and non-goals are things that may be good ideas we might do later on, but they're just not something we're doing right now. And by having this conversation about goals and non-goals, you keep a hyper focus for the team on what they are trying to achieve right now. And this is a really important conversation, and getting to a state where you've got very few goals and lots of non-goals is really important. And then the sort of the next steps of really just having enough design, enough roadmap, just enough of all of those things. So you're story mapping those few goals into stories, that it's a team sport, that it's visual, and all those sorts of good things are really important, and allows the team to get off to a great start. So, and then also we have this, which is our sort of set of defaults, which is available on GitHub. And this is the sort of landscape of things that we think the team are going to consider on their journey. But there's some really interesting ones, things like being able to deploy to production very quickly on day one is a very key indicator for when teams are forming. Actually, technically, how much autonomy do they have? How enabled are they? And also things like, are they going to be able to do continuous delivery, continuous deployment? These are like very simple things, but they give you a visibility on the rest of the organization and the environment in the team and around the team. There's a talk that Matt Skelton did, who's the author of Team Topologies, with Ben Steele, and they were talking about how to understand teams, and maybe in complements, I think, what James was saying. And there's a great framework and an open source set of tools that can be used to understand the team, understand what they need to work on next. So there's a link to it there. There's a link at the end, but that's a really interesting webinar to watch that complements this. So in terms of what we're talking about, the summary, we're going to align on our terminology. We're going to align our teams for flow. We want to reduce that cognitive load. We want to think about the team topology, how we iterate on that, but also the foundations. It's not just if you get the right topology, then that's going to be success. And also using that data pyramid to, transform data from raw data into wisdom and meaning, and then out to products. Ooh, not much time left. So renewable dad joke time. So a surge of energy walks into the bar and the barman says, anyone? Why the long phase? No. Okay, fine. Another one of these key pipelines is the pipeline of data. So Res are working with this broad spectrum of technologies. This is absolutely huge. I don't know if you can get a sense of the scale of this, but it's a gearbox for a wind turbine. But it's also a data generating machine. So these things have all sorts of sensors, synthetic or real, applied to them, and as a result can generate all sorts of data. And one real great opportunity here is that you can translate that data into wisdom and into data products. And those products are either going to give you things like you can reduce the downtime or the curtailment of a turbine by preventative maintenance, or you can even stop catastrophic failure where this whole gearbox would have to be replaced. And obviously in terms of the impact on the energy produced, that's going to be huge. So bringing together the hardware engineers and true cross-functional teams is a huge opportunity to get data, but also to translate that data and that insight and those people and their expertise into products that customers will want. And also the other thing is that these assets are in fields, they're in a muddy field, they're in the middle of the sea, but we can still reason about them in the way that we would in terms of continuous delivery, in terms of cloud native mindset, continuous deployment, all of those sorts of things. And this is really the production environment of the future. There was a time when, in my mind, certainly the production environment was a Kubernetes running in the cloud, and that was an important thing to reason about. But now, the production of the future is, hundreds of thousands of Teslas roaming the streets, or it's a set of turbines out at sea. So if we can reason about how to get configuration and software out to these devices and automate the flow of data back from the edge into our data centers to further enable these products, that's another really clear opportunity. So from this, slightly rushed would be, everyone loves a gearbox. Why wouldn't they? But even these really tricky, challenging environments can be thought of in continuous delivery, continuous integration, shipping code and configuration out to them multiple times a day. And that also bringing together a sense of that hardware, the people that know about it, and then the people that can build software that builds the products from it. If you can build those people together, you can get some really great flow optimized results. So this is our last joke. It's also our ultimate joke because it's so terrible. So Dad, what can you tell me what a solar eclipse is? And Dad says, no, son. No? Okay, fine. It's very hard without any audience feedback to tell terrible jokes. So I think in conclusion, what I hope we've taken from this rather whistle-stop tour is that that we can optimize our people, but we can optimize them for that low cognitive load and for flow, and do that in comparison with those solid foundations around product mindset or technical excellence, and that team topologies gives you a way of doing that in a way that everyone can be aligned and can be talking about the same thing. That we want to build that sensing capability is not about using team topologies or anything else to build what do we need right now. It's about how can we iterate on it. Even tricky environments can use continuous delivery and those sort of approaches. And then we want really early feedback on all of those elements, all those different competing elements potentially that we talked about in terms of those pipelines of flow that need aligning, that we should be able to get feedback early on all of those, even if one of those is around how the organization has designed itself. So this is our prize. This is our strap line around returning joy and creativity. And I think working like this and working for companies like Res is obviously a very easy way of doing that, but we need to be positive about the future that we have. We can't just get up and feel depressed every day. And this is Res's. And there's like a really great opportunity if we can focus on this to achieve this, which is fantastic. So I've got 4 seconds left. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you found this useful. If you could scan this and give me some feedback on my talk, I would love it. And also there are some links on that URL to the data that I've talked about and some of those other webinars and approaches. So thank you very much.